So today, the topic is about going pro. So as we work in a business, as people pay us for what we do, we gotta kind of understand that we are professionals. So there's a difference between an amateur and a professional. And so we're gonna talk about the work skills of a growing leader. And one of the things is when somebody starts with us during the interview process, they always say they're a hard worker. Like that's just a common thing. And very similar to what we talked about last month, we talked about decision making, we talked about driving. So if I asked, and we don't have to raise our hands, but if I asked who is a better than average driver, 90% of people think they're better than average. And that can't be true because better than average could only be 50% of people. And so we have this idea that we are a better driver or we are a hard worker. And we're going to talk about well, what does that actually mean? Because it might mean different things to different people. So to a man with a hammer, if your job is to put nails in a roof, to be a hard worker might be the most nails per day, right? A guy that can put 1,000 nails in a roof compared to a guy that can put 500 nails in a roof. If they're done accurately, the guy that can put 1,000 nails in would be a harder worker. Does that seem generally acceptable? Like the guy that can do more is a harder worker. Okay, so that's a very easy measurable task. But to a teacher, a hard worker doesn't mean more students. So I'm not a harder worker if I teach to 40 people or 80 people, right? It's the same amount of prep. The hard work is actually in the preparation and making sure things are ready to rock and roll. If you went to a classroom where the teacher wasn't ready, you wouldn't say they're a hard worker if they weren't prepared. So that's a little bit different than the guy with the hammer. A YouTuber, if somebody wanted to be I heard of an interview with Mr. Beast, and he said he's willing to spend 20 hours sorting through those images. What are those images called on videos? Like the thumbnails. He'll test and mess with thumbnails for a day straight because he knows that the importance of that thumbnail can change the video considerably. And so for him, hardworking is actually being able to sit in that level of detail for so long. Or when our projects leaders look through a bid, a hard worker isn't to get through a bid in 2 hours, it's to catch all those details, which might take 20 hours of digging in. And so hardworking can look different to different people. And so what we're going to talk about today is kind of building the ideal. So what's the ideal hard worker? And we're going to talk about some skills and traits of that. And this is who brings the most value. The more you go pro, the more value you bring. And it's also, we're going to be talking about an almost impossible ideal. And that's part of my job, is to point towards ideals or set the standard that's almost impossible to achieve. and I understand that as a leader, that I'm setting these impossibly high standards, but that's kind of what keeps us from mediocrity, is going to an ideal state. It's going to be hard to achieve. And that when we have big goals, when we have a big ideal, there is going to be big resistance. So the resistance is kind of that enemy who wants to distract, wants us to compare, wants us to drift, to quit, wants to destroy us. And if we want to work towards an ideal, we have to know that there is going to be a resistance that wants to pull us back. And the only way to do that is you got to fight against the resistance. I'm sure you guys have heard of the two wolves. So there's two wolves in all of our brains, the good wolf and the bad wolf. Some might say the devil and the angel. And at all times they're whispering you should do this or you should do this. And they're well, which wolf is the strongest? And the answer is it's the one you feed. So if you feed the wolf that talks about drift away, or you don't have to do that, or if it's not fair, or you do you, or all these selfish thoughts, then you're not going to work towards an ideal. But if you fight against it, if you know that there's going to be a battle inside your mind, and if you know you're going to go against it, then you can feed the good wolf that continues to build here. So we're going to go through 3 columns of kind of work skills. The first one is commit to consistency. So to be an ideal going pro, a pro commits to consistency. A pro has accountability, and a pro also requires focus. So when we think about consistency, there's this idea that where we're at today and where we're at in the future, we want to grow. This is called up and to the right because we're going on a XY axis, we're going up and to the right. And so we want to see that our skills are growing over time. That's what that shows. And what we have to know is that there is incremental progress over time, but it's got to be consistent and regular. So what happens a lot of times is we get really good and then we drop. We get really good and then we drop. We get really, really good, and then we drop. So maybe we work 60 hours one week. We're the hardest worker. Our team's saying, good job, good job. But then Monday, we get a little tummy ache and we call off, and the team can't count on us. Like, we don't want that. We want people that can stay consistent regardless of if they're feeling good, regardless of if they're feeling bad, that you know you can count on them. And so we have to show up. That's step one. You can't be an ideal going professional if you're not here. And you got to show up physically, so that means you have to be in the room, you have to physically be present, and you have to show up mentally. So sometimes you've got people that show up physically, but they're not mentally. Or so you got to think that they got to actually be on the job site. If we're talking about a work site, you got to be on the job site, and you got to bring your best mental. So if we don't have this, we can't build off anything else. The second one is we got to stick with it. We got to have some grit. You got to have patience and persistence. So if somebody works here, let's say 90 days or a year, and they're like, hey, I want to get better. What can I do to get better? Or like some of it is just you got to stick with it. You got to stick through those areas where it's kind of a lull, like where you keep on putting in work and it doesn't feel like you're getting better. And then you can kind of break through to a new level of growth. But you got to have patience and persistence to stick with it, because there's going to be some suck associated with anything. But to go pro, you got to show up and you got to have that stick with it grit. 3 is you just got to do work. You got to be productive and efficient. And, we've been talking about keeping score as part of our training element. Like, you got to put up results. So you have to be accountable. You have to be able to actually produce work when you're here. So you could show up and you could be really patient and persistent, but you also have to do work while you're working. And then again, building off that, it's results or score. You got to keep score. Pros like scoreboards because it's proof that they win. So Marshall, thinking about the baseball, does your son have more fun when they win a game compared to when they lose? Absolutely. So Clark's coach this year said, hey guys, baseball's about fun. Let's go out there and have some fun. And Clark told the coach, well, coach, it's actually more fun when we win. And that's what it is. It's like more fun when we win. We could have fun at work, but if we're always having rework, if customers are always talking trash about how we're not delivering results, that's going to take away the fun of this business. Like, we could have this meeting, but if we don't go out there and do good work, then none of this means anything. So the consistent piece is show up, we stick with it grit, we got to do work, we got to produce work, and then we got to want to get those results. We want to achieve goals, we want to go towards something. Accountability, we're all counting on your accountability. This means that we have to be able to count on each other as part of a team. Like, everything in this business counts on somebody else doing what they said they would do so the next person can do their job. And so it's really important that what you say is what you do, and that what you say and you don't do, that's going to cause some issues. So the test of this is when someone says, I got it, do you cast your worries aside and say, all right, like, I know they got it? Or do you feel like, I don't know if they really got it, I'm going to need to follow up? So it could be as simple as something saying, hey, I'm going to go do multi-tool corners, I got it. Like, do you really believe they have it, or do you have to feel like you have to follow up and check in on them? And so you got to think about, like, do they follow through with what they say? This is really important for us inside of our company, but also outside our business too. So if I said, hey, I'll get back to you Tuesday on this, and then Thursday morning I call a client and say, oh, I'm so sorry, I got busy. I know I said Tuesday, but it's Thursday. Do you think that builds or takes away trust? Yeah, so I call that a white collar lie. It's like not really a lie. Or if I say, hey, I'll get it to you early next week, and I get it to them Wednesday. Is that early next week? No, it's kind of midweek, right? And so it's like these little white lies that keep us from being responsible or accountable. If I said, hey, I'll get it to you early next week, and I send it to them Monday, would you guys say that builds trust? And so we got to know that when we talk to people, whether it's a client or somebody on our team, when someone says, I'm going to do this, do you believe they actually are going to do it and get it done? And so first part of being accountable is just prepared. Anyone can react. So if this building started on fire right now, we'd all react, right? We'd all run outside, we'd find a fire extinguisher, we'd put it out, we'd call 911. Like, anybody can do that. Like, SOS situation, this happened bad on a job, we got to do this, we'll work crazy hard. Like, anybody can react. But pros prepare. So that's actually why we have fire extinguishers in this building, is because we're prepared. So if we would have never prepared, a fire would start, we'd be in a pinch, we wouldn't have a fire extinguisher. And then that's when we run jobs, when we run work, that we have to think about anyone can react to situations when it sucks, because you have to. Professionals put the time, prepare in when they don't have to. You gotta own it. You gotta recognize that everything is your fault. And so it's gotta be like an extreme level of ownership. And I've heard it said, like, you can't even blame the weather, because you knew that weather can be unpredictable, and so you should prepare with a backup plan even for weather. And so that's just an extreme level of ownership of saying, like, I own it, it's my fault. Disciplines. There's 2 different levels of discipline. One is, this is a training element. There's different ways we could train. You could open a book, you could read a WP, you could watch a YouTube video, you could go on like Khan Academy and like learn and grow. But it's easy to have other people discipline. So other people discipline means, hey, we're gonna start this meeting at 7 o'clock and we are going to do a training. Or we're gonna do classroom sesh at 2 o'clock on Thursday, everybody shows up. The reason you do that is because you have enough discipline, because you're accountable to other people. That's a very easy thing to learn. The hard thing to learn is self-discipline. So that means like, hey, I'm gonna wake up at 5:30 tomorrow and I'm gonna do this for 15 minutes before I go to work. Or before I go to bed, I'm gonna do this. Or on my own accord, I'm gonna try to get better. On my own accord, I'm gonna save money. Even if nobody sees, even if nobody notices, I'm gonna have the discipline to do that. And that's self-discipline. That's when no one else is counting on you. They wouldn't know if you broke that promise in your mind to yourself or not. That would be self-discipline. And that's the tough one to do, is even if no one knows, even when these 2 wolves are saying, hey, you don't have to do that, like you're tired, take care of yourself, don't do the work, even in that mode, you'll choose to do what you said or what you made the promise in your head to. And then communication. It's this understanding that things do change and you have to adjust and adapt. You have to, again, accountability means that we're gonna be part of a group. You're accountable to other people. So if something does change, if you're like, hey, I'll get that to you Monday, and you're waiting on a vendor to get you something back for you to do your work, if that doesn't happen, you communicate and say, hey, I know I told you Monday, I don't have all the information yet, I'm still waiting on something else. I just wanted to update you and let you know what's going on so you know that I can still be accountable. Or if you did it, you can say, hey, I said I would edge this whole room. Can you come walk the edges with me to make sure they look good? It's like, make sure, like, it's reminding people that said, I gotcha, or I did it to confirm that you followed through with that. And that's how you build accountability, is you got to communicate with people to let them know that you did it, or if things need to pivot. So we talked about consistency, we talked about accountability, and then the next one is focus. And I'm pretty sure I'm setting a record for the shortest time frame. So this is moving fast. So forward progress requires focus. One of the goals I have is that people would say that I'm the most focused person they know. And for me, that doesn't mean like, put me on this task and I'll stay on it, which is a really good skill set. But I want to be the most focused person people know based upon long-term like thinking about a business. So our company that you're walking into has been very focused on growing leaders who deliver best work for a long time. And I continue to say I want to do it the rest of my life. But that would mean that I have to do that and I have to have results and stay on task and not get distracted by other things. So to do this, I have to have thoroughness. I have to make sure that every little thing is done very thoroughly. I can't just get things to 80% and then quit. I gotta stay on, which kind of builds with that stick with it grit too. But it's gotta be thorough. It's gotta be taken all the way to 100. If I don't know, I gotta ask. I gotta get things to the finish line. I'm gonna have to decide. I have to make a call. At some points, you can't have indecision. You can't leave your options open. You just gotta pick a path and commit to it. Prioritize. We're constantly being having to pivot or prioritize. One of the things about, let's just say Chelsea, in your role, you send billings out every day, right? Let's just say throughout your day you have to send billings out. Those are important to get out so we can get paid, right? But sometimes I might bring you something that says, hey, we need this pre-qual form filled out to do this bid, or we need this bid bond and we need it done by Tuesday. So all of a sudden the priorities of your day have to shift to get the highest priority thing done, right? Things happen like that on our job site. Every role here has this prioritization. Hey, it's Kyle and Mark, it's really important to clean up back there, get that equipment done, but all of a sudden a machine comes in and we need that machine tomorrow. Our priorities shift really fast. And you have to be able to shift to those, prioritize what needs to be done, and then get back to the regular rhythm. Diligence, thing about being focused is it's fun and to do big projects that are exciting, that might have some notoriety around it, or like working downtown, or it's got some public facing stuff. So it's like, it's cool to be part of those big projects, but also know that we have to bring that same intensity, that same focus to the smallest things we do too. So we can't just be like, oh, I bring my best when it's fun. Oh, that small project doesn't matter. I don't need to bring my best. Diligence means big and small, that we put our craft in all. And that's it for this meeting. Going pro is a mixture of all these skills. These are the skills that when you bring these skills to your work, it's going to be good for you and good for the people around you.